What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, the official Cliffy J, and I'm back with another video. And today, I'm gonna be giving you guys another challenge ranking. And this one gonna be a little bit different. I'm gonna be talking about the best losing performances in challenge history. And this was probably the hardest list I've made in terms of ranking the players and ranking the performances because it is very hard to decipher these extremely strong performances because it's a lot of times when a player is the best player or a person performs the best on a season and they don't win. Most of these performances, the players did make the final and were able to also give a strong performance in the final. But if they didn't make the final, they had to clear in the dailies and clear in eliminations. And a couple of players were able to do that. So I think that first, before we get into the list, I should hit you guys with some honorable mentions. And those performances are Derek on Gauntlet 2. He was able to win 4 eliminations and he was a strong performer in the dailies, but I just don't think that this was enough to make up for the fact that he was on the bottom of the totem pole on his team politically and he wasn't able to make the final. We also have Wes and KC from Fresh Meat. And we also have Leroy from Double Agents. And this is one that I think was extremely close to making the list. Strong politically, and he had his strongest season in the dailies. But I do think a big reason that they were so dominant in the dailies was because Casey was the best girl on the season. Now, I'm not saying that Leroy didn't have a strong performance. He did. But I don't necessarily think that he was better than CT on this season, better than Fessy on this season, better than Corey on this season. I don't necessarily think that he was just miles ahead of them in the way that would he need to be for him to be on this list. But at the end of the day, he is not making the list. So let's get to the actual top 10. And at number 10, I've got Ninja Natalie, War of the Worlds 1 performance. And this is one that I think I was really debating on if she was able to be on the list because politically, she more just rode Paulie's coattails. Like they were partners for most of the game, so it makes sense. But at the end of the day, I can't give her much credit politically. I do think she did grow strong relationships with Turbo and D, and that definitely does matter. And that's probably why I'm gonna give her some credit politically. On the other side, when we look at her from a physical standpoint, she was extremely great. She was arguably the best female performer in the dailies. I believe she was the best female performer in the dailies, but I see the argument for Cara and Maddie and stuff like that. But when we're just looking at the extremely tough final that she was able to complete and perform better than any woman in the final and keep up with the men, I just think that you got to put her on the list. Extremely solid performance. I got her at number 10. And at number 9, I've got someone that I know people are probably expecting to be higher, but hear me out. I've got Landon's duel 2 performance. And when I was first making this list, I was just assuming Landon would be in the top 5 just because when you look at his performance in the season, he was extremely dominant in the dailies against players like Mark and Evan and Brad. But a big reason he was so dominant in the dailies was because he was an extremely solid daily performer. But other than that, he was only able to win 1 elimination on the season, then got DQ'd basically against Brad, and he had no wherewithal politically. Like he was out of it and he was okay with being out of it. And I do think that that being the case definitely has to knock this season when you also take into account the fact that he didn't make the final. And his elimination loss was pretty fluky. Like it was weird. Like that wasn't like one where, yeah, Brad didn't dominate you, but it also wasn't one where you performed good. And at number 8, I've got Paulie from World of the Worlds 1. And of course, this is a season where he was super, super dominant in terms of dailies and politically. Strong stranglehold on the game. Maybe not the de facto most dominant player because Wes was extremely dominant too. But in terms of the dailies, I do think he was closer to the best performer. It's a legitimate argument for him to be the best performer. If I gun to my head, if I'm saying who was the best performer in the dailies, I would say Paulie. But the main reason that he is so low on the list is because of him getting purged and the situation that occurred when it happened. He didn't perform good enough, and it was on him. So I can't put him too highly on the list. And at number 7, I've got CT from Rivals. And I was thinking, okay, I'll put CT and Adam and then probably put him at number 10. But then I thought, Adam's performance isn't even good enough to be on this list, so I'm not gonna put him on here, especially when it's a lot of speculation that he threw the season, you know? So I just looked at it from a CT perspective. And if we look at it from a CT perspective, politically is where he would stand for probably needing to improve. But you also look at the fact that this was the beginning of a socially good CT, just he had the stigma that he had before this season. So it was really no way he was going to be in a great position politically. That wasn't really his fault as a game player. Now, I do think he does need to be knocked a little bit because he didn't make the final, but it's also your partner didn't try. You performed the best in that elimination. So I feel like I have to give this to CT. He was really had a complete anchor on him for most of the season and still was extremely impressive in eliminations and dailies. So I'm going to go ahead and put CT at 7. And at number 6, I've got someone that I know you guys are going to be surprised about, but I don't give a damn. Michaela from USA 2. Her and the Secret Garden were the strongest alliance on the season, and she was a huge part of that alliance, obviously. And if you're asking me, I think it's very clear that she was the best female performer in the dailies. It's argument for Tori, outside argument for Desi, but I think she was clearly the best female performer in the dailies. And it was really a boneheaded decision that cost her the finals win. Not saying she definitely would have beat Desi, but I do favor her in the rest of that final. I think that she is stronger than Desi. I think that she has more heart than Desi. So, I just think she would have got that done. But was a very close one, and Desi easily could have got it done because she is one of the best female performers in challenge history. And at number 5, I've got Alton from the Inferno 3. And this is one that I kind of always knew was going to be on the list. He was in a really good position politically on his team, was the captain and the de facto leader, on top of the fact that in the dailies, he was right alongside Abram in the argument for being the best daily performer in an extremely dominant season for both of them. They were very clearly the best two performers in the dailies and were neck and neck the entire season. And this during Abram's prime when Abram was one of the best players of all time and Alton was also one of the best players of all time. And then in the finals, Alton had a strong performance. He was doing just fine. You could definitely say Abram outperformed him, but I just think that Alton was a great leader, and I think his team is the main reason that he lost. Not saying he definitely would have beat Abram, but I do think that as a team aspect, he was better than like a Kenny or a Derek for sure, and better than a Johnny, and the players that were like an Ace, the players that were on his team that were holding him back. And at number 4, I've got Laurel from Cutthroat. And this is one where it's like could have probably put CT and Laurel on the list more because they have a bunch of not a bunch, but they both have performances where they were arguably the best performer on the season, arguably the best player on the season, and they didn't win. And this is a perfect example of that. Laurel and Abram dominated the season in the dailies. A big reason that the great team was so dominant was because of Abram's leadership and Laurel's ability as a player. And she was solid politically. It's not like she was just out of the loop. Like, she wasn't the best politically, but she was solid. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. And at number 3, I've got Paulie from World of Worlds 2. I think that this is a very strong season from Paulie for a couple of reasons. A lot of people like to say that because he was on the really strong USA team, you can't really put much value into his daily performances. But I just think that's bullcrap. He was extremely impressive in most of the dailies. When we just look at it from a player for player standpoint, him, Jordan, and Zach were the best players on the USA team in terms of performance in the dailies. And you have to also look at the fact that he was the biggest political player of the season. And when they got to the final, it really wasn't his fault that he quote unquote gassed out. Because even players like Zach and Leroy point out the fact that Paulie did pull his weight. It was just the fact that it was much heavier, 40 pounds heavier, and they only could carry with the same amount of players. So that's just a disadvantage. That's a disadvantage, especially when you take into account the fact that Rogan, CT, and Jordan are all pretty strong guys. It's not like they're weak guys over there. They're all around the same strength as the other guys on the other team. So it's like, I think that's a significant disadvantage no matter how you slice it. And in the final, he still was able to solve a puzzle that CT and other players, Puzzle Kings, weren't able to solve. And he was able to get to that last checkpoint by completing the puzzle on the purge section of the final. So it's not like he wasn't able to have a strong performance. People act like he just was terrible and gassed down. He's the reason they lost, when that's not even necessarily the truth. And at number 2, I got Tori from season 40. And this is one that was like, I felt like I knew she was going to be on the list before I made this list, but I didn't know she was going to be this high. She was very strong politically and was never truly in danger in terms of someone sending her in and stuff like that, unless it was going to be bananas. And then she had a bunch of alliances with all of the men on the cast, basically, except for like Bananas and Nehemiah and stuff like that. And she was arguably the best female performer in the dailies, winning a handful of individual dailies. Extremely impressive season from a competitive standpoint. And she was able to beat Casey in an extremely close elimination, which is very impressive. And the reason I have her at number 2 really isn't even necessarily her fault. The other player that I have at number 1 didn't have to see an endurance like water elimination right before the final. So they were able to be the best performer in the final and throughout the season, which she wasn't able to achieve that because of that elimination, in my opinion. And at number 1, I have Zach from Vendettas. And this is one that I knew was always going to be number 1. I'm not going to lie. Maybe I'm biased, but I just think Zach had one of the best seasons in challenge history, if not the best season in challenge history. And I'm not even like trolling. From a performance standpoint, from a contextual standpoint, he dominated the season from beginning to end alongside Tony in terms of politically. Like literally dominated, controlled basically everything, had control in basically every move, agency throughout the entire game. And from a like competition standpoint, this is one of the most impressive seasons in the dailies from Zach. Like Zach was very dominant in the dailies, never turned in a bad performance, and was clearly the best performer in the dailies. Players like Brad were very strong, but Zach was clearly the best performer in the dailies, and it's not even close in my opinion. Then in the final, he was able to come out on top over the other guys in terms of, though Leroy did start off really strong, he was able to show better endurance and show consistency throughout the final and be the best male performer. And in my opinion, the best performer in the final. I knew he was going to lose as soon as they got to the last checkpoint because Kara is a fazan. Kara is insane. She is crazy in terms of memory challenges. It's literally like you really can't beat her. So I wasn't surprised Zach lost that, but was an extremely impressive season from him. Best performer in the final and best performer in the dailies, while also being the de facto best political player on the season. And that is the end of today's list, guys. Let me know what videos you guys would like to see from me next. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. Push the notification bell so you can be notified every time I drop a new lit banger. Peace.